What's going on, everyone? It's Phil from Earth Nails and Tails. I just finished installing my brand new raised beds, and I wanted to show you how to fill them for success this year and for years to come. Our veggies are not natural or native plants, and they've really been bred over hundreds or even thousands of years in order to produce the attributes we desire, like big leaves or that sweet fruit. For these reasons, it's important to create the conditions that your herbs and veggies will absolutely love. They really want a soil that's light and fluffy, retains moisture, drains well, and maintains a balance of air and water and nutrients in order to allow that beneficial microbial growth and the strong root development. Most veggies prefer a soil that's slightly acidic, around a pH of 6.5, and the soil that we're going to create today is going to meet all of these parameters, distribute nutrients and moisture when the plants need it most. So let's talk about each material that we're going to be using in order to create our soil, why it's important for our herbs and veggies. Then we'll get into figuring out how to calculate how much of each material you need in order to fill your raised beds. And lastly, we'll talk about the steps you take when you're initially setting up your raised bed, so that way you have success this year and for years in the future. All right, so let's talk about the materials that we're going to use. And if you've been around gardening for a little while, you may have heard of Mel's mix, which comes from Mel Bartholomew and Square Foot Gardening. And I've been using this mix for years, and I have had fantastic results using it. What it is 3 parts, equal parts, peat moss, perlite, and compost. And all of these things create a soil structure that is absolutely fantastic for your plants, provides the right pH, moisture retention, and nutrient distribution. All of these things are so important to grow healthy plants. Now, there are different ways and different types of soils that we can create, or where we get our sources from, and that's really what we're going to be talking about, because there really isn't a one size fits all that's going to work for everyone. So I want to provide you all of the options on where you can get these materials and some substitutes that meet the goals for your garden as well. All right, so let's start off with peat moss. Why is peat moss so amazing for the garden? Well, its structure is absolutely fantastic. It's light and fluffy, and it also retains moisture. It can absorb multiple times its weight in moisture, and as moisture is needed by your plants in your garden, it is distributed through that soil. So it really makes an excellent material. It also slightly lowers your pH. The pH of peat moss in and of itself can range between like a 3 to a 5. But once you incorporate it into your mixture with the perlite and the compost, that pH comes up quite a bit and really settles around neutral or just under, which is pretty much what our plants are looking for. I know some of you are looking for alternatives to peat moss, but I'm going to tell you from research all across the world, there is still not a 100% alternative that works as well as peat moss does. So in the horticultural aspect, there really is nothing yet that compares to the performance of peat moss in the garden. However, we have seen people start to create their own leaf mold, which is basically taking a pile of leaves and letting it sit for multiple years and then mixing that into your soil. And more commonly that we're seeing nowadays is people using coconut coir or coconut husk, which is created from a manufacturing process, and that's shipped from all over the world. So that does have its own environmental impacts as well, but it does act very similarly to peat moss. It has a very nice light fluffy structure. It holds some moisture, but not as much as peat moss does. But if you are looking for potentially different option in regards to sustainability, those are other options that could work well for you. One of the things that I would 100% recommend is using a high quality topsoil. Topsoil is a mixture of sand, silt, and clay. And all of these things, it's actually soil, true soil, basically different processes or different stages of a rock being broken down into what we would typically known as soil. And the amazing things with sand, silt, and clay, all 3 of them add to the structure of your soil and are able to hold nutrients in different ways and create that nice loamy structure that your veggies need in order to grow those nice strong roots. So if it were me, if I were to choose a variant of peat moss, it would 100% be subbing in high quality topsoil over peat moss. The second material that we're going to be using in our mix is perlite. And perlite is a volcanic rock, a fired volcanic rock that has a lot of pores and helps to maintain the aeration and structure of your soil. So when you mix this into your mixture, what it does is provide a place where water isn't going to settle and has air pockets in your soil where your roots and microorganisms will be able to have access to those pockets of air and be able to evenly distribute the air and moisture more easily throughout the environment. This is going to allow your plant's roots to travel much further and establish themselves. And that's going to provide a much stronger root structure, and your plants are going to have access to much more nutrition because of it. And lastly, but not least, our third material is going to be compost. And compost really is just a magic material. We take all of those organic materials, we break them down over time, and they create this beautiful structure that is full of microbial life, a little bit of nutrition, and continues to break down over time in order to feed your plants for multiple years into the future. So when you add compost to your garden, you're adding that material that's already slightly broken down. You're adding the microbial life that lives within the compost itself. So you're inoculating your garden soil, you're inoculating that perlite and that peat moss or topsoil with loads of beneficial microorganisms that are going to continue to break down all of these materials over the course of 5 years to continuously feed your garden over that time. So when you combine all of these materials together, they create a super powered mixture that all of your plants, all of your herbs, all of your fruits and veggies are going to absolutely thrive in. So I know that was a lot of information on all the materials, why we're using them, and some of you are probably like, Phil, just tell me what to put in my raised beds and I'll do it. But I really think it's important for you to understand why we've chosen each one of these materials and how it is going to affect the growth of your plants in your garden, as well as your sustainability and impact on the environment. All of these things are extremely important and are going to help you become better gardeners. But now that we know everything that we need, let's mix up some soil and talk about filling our raised beds. Right here, I've got my beautiful brand new sage green 15-inch deep Birdies raised bed. And behind me, I've got a few wooden raised beds, all I filled with the exact same soil mixture that I've been talking about. Now, before we set up our raised bed and lay it in position, there are a few things that you should do in order to promote the longevity of your raised bed and your garden. I would highly recommend laying down cardboard along any surface that you plan on putting a raised bed. What this is going to do is snub out any of those weeds and keep them from growing into your raised bed soil, because the last thing that you want is competition and having to come out to the garden every single day or every single week and picking out all of those weeds. Unfortunately, it is inevitable. You are going to have some weeds in your soil, so learn to love it because it's going to be a part of your life. But you can significantly reduce the number of weeds that you have in your raised bed by putting down that cardboard. I always like to put down my cardboard when I put my raised bed on top, have about 6 inches that stick out past your raised bed. So that way, if you have any weeds that are popping up around the raised bed, they're not gonna be able to dive underneath and then potentially grow up the edges of your raised bed here. Another thing that you can do in regards to protection, not from weeds, but from potentially small rodents like rats or mice or moles, is lay down a piece of hardware cloth. 1/4-inch hardware cloth works absolutely great. Very similar concept. If those rodents try to come in and dig underneath your raised bed, they're gonna come in contact with that metal that they're not gonna be able to, one, squeeze through or chew through, and you're gonna have much better results dealing with your garden. So if you know you have those little pests around your area, that is a great way to prevent them from really damaging your fruits, your veggies, and your herbs in your raised beds. Now that our raised bed is all set up, we need to figure out how much soil we need in order to fill the raised bed. And in order to do this, you're going to need to calculate the volume that your raised bed takes up. First thing that you want to do is determine the area, which is the length times the width. So just get the width of your raised bed, and if you're using a Birdies 8-in-1 like I have right here, it's about 42 inches, as well as measure the length of the raised bed, which is about 84 inches, and that's going to yield you about 25 square feet. Regardless of whatever raised bed you're using, measure the length and the width, and that will give you the area. Once you have the area of your raised bed, you're going to have to use that in order to determine the volume. And the way that you calculate that is by multiplying your area times the depth of your raised bed. For my Birdies raised bed, it is 15 inches. And I want to convert that into feet in order to match the same units as my square footage, which is in square feet. So I have 25 square feet and I've got 15 inches. In order to convert inches into feet, you simply divide it by 12, which yields 1.25. And if I multiply 25 by 1.25, that gives me about 31 cubic feet. So what that tells me is I need 31 cubic feet of material in order to completely fill this raised bed. If we remembered that we need 3 materials, peat moss, or your appropriate substitute like topsoil, perlite, and compost. 31, relatively close to 30. Let's just split them up evenly, 10, 10, and 10. So I need 10 cubic feet of each material in order to fill this raised bed. Now, if you have multiple raised beds like I do, I've got 6 Birdies raised beds and I've got 8 wooden raised beds. What I would do is calculate the total volume that you need and then determine how much of each material that you need. Depending on where you are, depending on where you live, you may have access to a bulk distributor that you can call and have them deliver the materials right into your driveway. It significantly saves on cost. I've spent a fifth less on compost ordering it from a major distributor than if I were to go to the big box stores and buy bags of compost. 5 times less, that's including the delivery fee. So definitely look around, and many municipalities have municipal compost as well that you can literally just drive your car or your truck there, fill up as much as you want for free, and bring it back home. So definitely look for these options, but I'll also provide some resources in the description of this video for you to take advantage of. So I know I've been relating all of these calculations to my Birdies raised beds, but just remember, calculate your own volumes, determine your total volume that you need of the materials, divide that number by 3, and that's how much you're going to need for your compost, peat moss, and perlite. Now, let's say you have a deeper raised bed. If you have a raised bed that's 15 inches or less, I would highly recommend that you fill that whole thing with your high quality soil, because most fruits and veggies and herbs, their roots are only going to go down about 15 inches, probably closer to 12 inches. Your deepest veggies like your carrots are probably going to max out around 12 inches unless you have an extremely large variety, which will probably keep on growing anyway. But if you have a raised bed that, let's say, is 30 inches tall, you're not going to need to fill that whole raised bed with high quality soil, and it's going to be a bunch of money. So one thing that I would recommend doing for a deeper raised bed like this is to fill the bottom half with logs, twigs, leaves. I would put the larger logs in first and then fill it with twigs and leaves. Just try to use a brown material. They're going to take a very long time to break down, especially those logs, and they may even absorb some moisture and provide that back to your raised beds. Once you have your raised beds filled, probably halfway if you're using a 30-inch bed, then go ahead and pile on your high quality mix on top of those. regardless of what depth your raised bed is, the last 12 to 15 inches of that raised bed where your plants are going to be growing need or prefer that high quality potting soil. One final tip before I send you all off. Before you just take all of your materials and throw it in the raised bed, make sure you mix everything and incorporate everything together before you add it to your raised bed. Because the perlite especially is really hard to incorporate into the soil and loves to stick toward the outsides of your raised beds. So get yourself a wheelbarrow or a large tarp and really take the time to incorporate that mixture, because if everything is mixed together and incorporated well and creating that homogeneous mixture, you're going to have much better results out in the garden. Remember, each one of these materials is performing a very specific task, and you don't want to have isolated pockets of materials all throughout your garden soil, because then your plant's roots are going to react differently to those different pockets and you may not get the results you desire. So really take the time to mix your materials and then add it to your raised beds, and I'm telling you, you're gonna have much better success overall. All right, everyone, well, that's going to sum things up for today's video. At the end of the day, filling a raised bed really is pretty simple. All you need to know is that basic calculation on how to calculate volume and understand the different roles that each material plays in order to have success in your garden. Again, my name is Phil from Earth, Nails, and Tails, and if you like this video, make sure you subscribe to our channel and hit that notification button so that every time we put out a new video, you are immediately notified. If you're looking for some more amazing homesteading and gardening content, you've come to the right place, and I can't wait to see you in the next video.